Hey, coming up on your favorite podcast, Week 6 of the NFL is in the books and no COVID cancellations or postponements to speak of. That is a giant victory. Ryan and Zach are both back in with me this week to talk about all kinds of stuff that's broken out over the NFL. We've got a lot of bad teams. Tua is starting. That's bizarre. The Cowboys really stink, and it looks like they're already turning on Mike McCarthy, much to Zach's delight. And we see just how and where the Vikings have gone wrong, and how do we assess blame. That's all coming up next on the pod. Hey, it's the Tim Anderson Podcast Show. I'm Tim. Zach over again at his place down the road and back this week after a week off. Good to have him. Our buddy Rhino. Ryan, good to see you. Good to see you, Zach. Yeah, it's nice to have everybody here. Nice happy family again after week 6 of the NFL. And a refreshing week, gentlemen. No COVID cancellations, no crazy reschedules, no nothing. It just a week of football. It was almost like the world was right for 5 minutes.
I will tell you, though, for as much as everyone complains about the quality of play on Thursday Night Football, I sure miss not having it this week.
Yeah, it was a little void, wasn't it? It was like there was something missing, although I was able to watch some baseball, I guess. But that Thursday night void, I don't care if the football's bad. I like having it, I guess.
Do we get a Week 7 Thursday Night Football game, right?
Yes, we have Giants and Eagles this week.
Beautiful.
And even that dandy of a game is going to be must-watch TV tomorrow night, right? I mean, we're all in on that.
Yeah, I'll watch.
Now, we'll get into the Eagles maybe later because I do have a Carson Wentz question, but let's start with the big news that broke out yesterday. Tua Tagovailoa, I can't say his name, I swear to God. I try so hard. Tagovailoa. He's named the starter for Miami, and it seems to come out. The timing seems to be the weird thing about this, but the sports media seems split on this, or not even split. I feel like they're 80-20, like way cool with it. Like they want to win the game. I guess I fall in the 20% that feels weird about this timing. I guess we'll start there. What say you, Ryan?
Look, I get wanting to do it. I get that you want to get out ahead of the Fitz meltdown that happens every time he seems to, put together a few good games. And he's had a couple of good games, so you want to have that team momentum rolling in, and you take the risk of switching out a horse midstream. But I feel for Fitz, man. This sucks for him. I don't know if you got the chance to see his quotes or his interview about this today. The guy's just broken up. He's heartbroken, and he's talking about how he feels like that might have been his last NFL game, and that's a hard thing, and it sucks to see happen to a guy who was having quite a bit of success for a team that really hasn't had much success over the last few weeks. They looked like they were really starting to click, and to be honest, I don't know what sense it makes to do this. I mean, if you're like 1-5 and you've got a rookie quarterback and you want to get some runs, see what you got, that makes some sense, but. Man, it feels a bit premature to me. I'm not going to dig it because I understand it, but I don't like it.
I'm on the other side. Like when we first talked about this, I thought the timing was weird, but I feel like the only successes they're having is in the win column. He's got 10 touchdowns and 7 interceptions in 6 games. So it's not like he's lighting the world on fire. He's throwing for about 250 yards a game. And even if you look at the Jets game, he threw for under 200 yards. So it's not like they're winning because of him. And so I think they see an opportunity here. They're not a playoff team right now, but they're close. They're ahead of the Patriots in the division. And like you said, they're just trying to get out in front of this stuff and see if they can catch lightning in the bottle and make the playoffs. Because, when's the last time Miami was relevant?
It's been a while. I mean, I'll grant you that. I guess my issue though here is I understand that you're not exactly replacing Dan Marino here, and that we shouldn't try to act like Ryan Fitzpatrick was having a Brett Favre in his prime kind of season here. that he is what he is at 37 years old, and he even probably acknowledged that he was the placeholder quarterback, and obviously he was. And I think we all agreed that at some point this season Tua was going to get in the game. There was no doubt about that. The timing here, to me, just feels a little weird. Like either it was predestined by Flores, like he said, look, he's going to play after week 6. We're going to have the bye and Tua's getting in the game, regardless of our record. He said that he must have thought that at the beginning of the season. Otherwise, it doesn't make a great deal of sense to me because you don't need to sell tickets. It's not like you need to create more buzz around your team because it doesn't matter. Nobody's coming to the games anyway. And people that can come are going to come no matter what. It doesn't make sense to have a guy who had his hip dislocated 1 year ago from right now, have no OTAs, no practices, no training camp, no first-team reps, and then just say after 6 weeks, this is our guy. And by the way, not tell the guy, the current guy, that, oh, just so you know, Ryan, it doesn't matter how you play. 6 weeks into the season, you're out. Why not just, I feel like you owe the veteran guy at least a little heads up. He shouldn't hear this second hand or third hand, and I feel like he did, and I feel like he was left in the dark. So for that, it's a dick move. Now, I like Brian Flores, so I'm not going to get angry at him. It just feels premature. I guess I don't understand the rush, but maybe you guys are right. I don't know. Zach, you seem to be on board with it, though.
I think what you brought up the big point, it's bye week, so they have 2 weeks now to get him ready to go. It's not like they were making the change on a undefeated season. And so I'm on board. Tua would have been the starter at the beginning of the year if he hadn't been hurt. I have no doubt in my mind that they would have just started with him.
That might be true.
I feel like they're comfortable with where he's at physically. I trust NFL coaches. They see practice. They see film that we don't. So I think he's ready to go.
And Ryan, you do acknowledge this, though, that with putting him in the game, you are conceding 2 games somewhere on the schedule. Like his rookie play and the mistakes he's probably going to make are going to cost them a couple of games. You have to think that, right?
Maybe. This is a guy, he didn't throw many picks at Alabama.
Neither did Greg McElroy. So what?
My point is that look, his first year, Teddy Bridgewater didn't put up eye-popping numbers, but he never lost the Vikings a game. You can have a rookie season if you play conservatively the right way without losing your team a bunch of games. You don't have to go out there and be a gunslinger. Now, he's got a bigger arm than Teddy does, but if he plays a game like Teddy played, man, I think that he could be just fine. That Dolphins offense isn't great, but it is built to control the ball a little bit, and that can be good for a young quarterback. And they're building something on offensive line too. And as I've said before, a good offensive line can make an average quarterback look better than average. So, maybe he looks a little bit better if that line starts playing well.
It's going to be interesting to watch. Obviously, it was a big move, and yeah, you're right. The Fitzpatrick, people should take his belt and shoelaces away from him. Make sure that he doesn't have anything around him here for the next couple of days. He was about as downtrodden as you've ever heard anybody.
Does he make sense in Dallas this year?
I was just going to bring this up. Who's the team that calls Miami for Ryan Fitzpatrick right now? Don't you feel like somebody's got to make a phone call? If you're Dallas and you've seen Andy Dalton play, wouldn't you rather have at least the chance of maybe Ryan Fitzpatrick being competent?
The contract makes sense, right? He's a free agent at the end of the year, so you're not investing anything into him beyond this year. He gives you better play than what Dalton showed, probably. And I think Dalton will be better, right? Dalton had a week to get ready.
And it didn't help that he had to throw the ball a ton because Elliott put it on the ground twice in the first, 6 carries or whatever. That doesn't help you.
So I think it makes sense there.
Yeah, Dallas doesn't do it for me, I don't think. But the NFC East is intriguing.
Yeah,
I look at a Washington team that's starting Kyle Allen. I look at a Philadelphia team that might be looking to move on from Carson Wentz. Maybe they trade him
I think that's
somewhere and deal for Fitzpatrick just to back up Jalen Hurts. Yeah, I don't know. There's a couple of different spots that make sense to me. I mean, you could argue that if San Francisco is really not impressed with Jimmy G, or if he's down for longer than they think, San Francisco could make some sense. I don't know. There's a couple of different situations I could see working out.
How about a team in Minnesota? What are the odds that there's a team that wears purple in Minnesota that might say, how about a 6th rounder for Ryan Fitzpatrick? I'm not saying, just saying.
Can we afford him?
You're right. We probably can't afford him. We'd probably have to cut something to make that work. I don't know. All right. So we'll keep an eye on that situation. Dolphins are obviously on bye this week. We'll revisit Tua's first start in a couple weeks when we hand out our midseason awards, which, by the way, is already next week, guys. Week 8 next year. Next week we're going to hand out midseason awards. Very excited to do that here on the pod. Our first ever podcast show, midseason NFL awards. Got to be exciting for that. I mean, if that's not riveting podcasting stuff, I don't know what is. I don't know what more we can do for you people. Let's talk about what we saw in Week 6. Big takeaways. Obviously, some interesting results. What are we looking at here through 6 weeks, guys? Ryan, what do you think?
Well, I think that there's a couple of things you can come back to. First of all, obviously, we got to start with the thing we're going to talk about here in a few minutes, but the Vikings are done. There's no coming back from this. It's over. You've now lost 5 games, and you're squarely in the basement of the division as far as how the 4 teams have looked. I think that the look of Dallas without Dak Prescott is sad. I've never seen a team so talented but so rudderless, other than maybe the Vikings this year.
How much of that falls on the head coach?
I think in 2008, Mike McCarthy made a lot of sense for a lot of people. I think in 2020, time may have passed him. Time may have left him a little bit. But
I think that's unfair a little bit.
Well, here's the thing. First of all, this really answers the question of, was it Rodgers or was it McCarthy? Because Rodgers is looking like an MVP. I mean, other than this week.
Yeah, he looked like it.
It was a rough week this week, but the rest of the season he's looked really good. So we got to take this as the exception, I think, unless he does it 2-3 weeks in a row. But McCarthy looks bad. There is no part of the management of that team that sounds good. And now you get these rumors coming out of Dallas this week that you have, that they're disorganized, that they're not coming to practice, prepared as coaching staff. They're not teaching guys to do things the way that they should be doing it. And these things get out in the NFL, man. And they don't sit under wraps like they do in college with unprepared coaches and guys that came in to take a paycheck. I don't trust McCarthy. I saw the product in Green Bay. I'm seeing the product in Dallas, and to be honest, they look pretty similar.
I think that the stuff right now, it felt like he took that year off, and we got a lot of sit down interviews and articles about how he was really delving into things now and looking at the new age offense and going to make adjustments. And he came out and he's almost like trying to prove to everyone he's someone different, and he's just making some really bad decisions.
And hang on, though. I mean, heading into this, they were scoring points. They can't stop anybody. I mean, and I get, it's on McCarthy because he hired Mike Nolan to be the defensive coordinator, and I think we could argue that that's maybe not the smartest move in the world, but scoring points hasn't been the problem other than in this game against Arizona, and it's not Mike McCarthy's fault that Ezekiel Elliott literally cannot hang on to the ball. Like, he's fumbling on a weekly basis. And these are the same whiny players that talked about how Jason Garrett wasn't getting the job done either. So at some point, doesn't this have to be you? Don't you as a player have to actually, do your job every once in a while? It can't always be the coach.
I told Tim this week that consistency is the ultimate measure of a coach.
Fair.
And they're inconsistent. They're an inconsistent team that is studded with talent, and they ain't winning. And honestly, Andy Dalton's not Dak Prescott, but Andy Dalton at least used to be a serviceable NFL quarterback. He should be a decent NFL backup. I don't think Andy Dalton is that bad. I think that you have a coach who doesn't know what to do. Well,
I think we talked about his decision-making earlier in the year. on like going for it and 2-point conversions and all that stuff. But I get it. Like Zeke fumbled twice in the first half, but you still need to run him back out there and not Tony Pollard.
Yeah, I could listen to that. Yeah, you have been off the McCarthy train as an owner of the Packers for a long time, Zach. Like you have been anti-McCarthy, I feel like, for a long time.
Yeah, it felt like there was a lot of we'll just run around and Aaron will make a play. And when you'd watch some of it, it got a little bit of burnout of just like, okay, like, can't we ever just scheme someone open? Can't we ever just have some, well drawn up plays and not have to pull a rabbit out of the hat every time?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's fair. And I just think that 6 games isn't enough of a test. I got to see a little more usually. I tend to reserve coaching judgment until I get – I got to at least see a season before I can make a call. I'm not ready to do that yet for McCarthy, but I understand that he may not get a full season in Dallas because, I mean, it's win now. Jerry Jones is an impatient man, and although at some point Jerry Jones has to take some blame here too. I mean, he's hiring these guys. So, I mean, it's something to keep an eye on. The Dallas thing was weird. I mean, they just got their asses kicked. What a great performance by Arizona. They look like they're back. They look like that and the Rams. They seem like the two most inconsistent teams. Like, you don't want to play them, but at the same time, they have some really peculiar losses on their record. This week was a great example of that for the Rams. They got beat up by a pretty injured and banged up San Francisco team that didn't look like they knew what they had at quarterback heading into that.
I think the other thing that I'd point out is the Colts are 4-2 very quietly. They look like a really good football team. There's some solidity in that defense. There's a really good running game, and they're starting to throw the ball a little bit. I think that's my AFC takeaway. I would say is they look like a contender in the AFC if they can get the right team in the right week.
I think any team with Phillip Rivers at quarterback is a pretender.
Maybe they should trade for Ryan Fitzpatrick.
No, come on now. Phillip Rivers had a great game on Sunday. He played well, didn't he?
Against the Bengals. Let's be quiet here.
Yeah, I mean, and that's okay. So who have they beaten? They've beaten the Vikings, the Jets, the Bengals.
Yeah. They've beaten the bad teams.
The Bears.
Yeah, the Bears are their best win. And the Bears are they're the weirdest 5-1 team in the history of football.
I mean, they've got some tests coming up. I mean, they got Detroit next week, which, make of that what you will. But after that, you pull the Ravens, Titans, Packers, Titans, and that's a pretty tough stretch. So I think we're going to learn more about them over the next 5 weeks. But I don't know. I think they're a good team.
Is there a chance the Titans have the division pretty much wrapped up in 5 weeks? Is there a chance then that they have that division totally on ice in 4 or 5 weeks?
Beat the Colts twice, I would say. Beat the Colts once, probably.
Texans and Jaguars are both 1-5. They stink. And then you have the Colts at 4-2.
Yeah, I mean, if you beat the Colts once, split with the Colts, you're probably winning the division.
Are the Titans not getting enough respect right now, Zach? Is it time that we start looking at Tennessee like a real Super Bowl contender?
I think we've learned that they're really well coached, and they have the guy who is doing, Belichickian things where, finding the loopholes in the rules, exploiting them, which is great, right? I mean, like, that's all the power to him. He's got a good defense. He's got the best running back in football. So, I mean, Super Bowl contender, I don't know. I mean, that's a tough conference, but they're a good team. They'll be a tough out for whoever they play.
This is the interesting matchup this week because they do have Pittsburgh this week, right? So one of the undefeated teams is going to go by the wayside. But I think if Tennessee wins that game, you have to, I think, put them in the hierarchy of maybe one of the 3 best teams in the league as far as chances to win, because Tannehill right now seems to be the difference. He's playing out of his mind. We're getting what we thought we would get from Derrick Henry, but Tannehill is playing on a different level. Like, he is contributing. Last year, I thought he was maybe more of a caretaker. This year, he seems to be like a legitimate weapon, like a legitimate offensive threat.
Yeah, he's doing enough to take some of the pressure off of Henry, and Henry's taking advantage of that. I mean, he had over 300 yards from scrimmage last week, didn't he?
Yeah, he was awesome.
Yeah.
And you couldn't pick Jonnu Smith out of a 2-man lineup standing next to Ryan probably in August, and now he's the best tight end in the NFL, next to George Kittle maybe and Travis Kelce.
Yeah.
Like, they have found some money in Tennessee. Like, they have.
And part of that, though, again, consistency being the measure of coaching, they're a consistent team. They don't take penalties. They don't make mistakes. They don't screw up. They don't get into negative situations. They pound the rock. They throw when they need to, and they hit guys that are, they might not be the best guys in the league, but they look like the best guys in the league because they're coached well.
And I would say, they do take penalties, but it's only when the coach tells them to.
Yeah.
Well, sure. But if you're doing it on command, that's what more can you ask?
You're being coached up to take those penalties. Come on now. I gotta say, I do appreciate. They do feel like kind of an old school throwback team, right? They feel very vintage, and there's something about that that's really fun to watch. And I think that kind of football still wins in January. I think tough guy football wins.
They scored out of the single wing on Sunday for their last touchdown.
Yeah, it's weird.
And I gotta say, look, Tennessee right now is who Mike Zimmer wants the Vikings to be.
Yeah.
Like every vision that you hear Zimmer talking about for the Vikings is exactly what the Tennessee Titans are. They're a well-coached, well-disciplined team that runs the ball well, that doesn't throw a ton, and they play defense. Man, it sounds like we hired the wrong guy.
Which brings us to our latest game here at the podcast. Let's play Who to Blame and What's the Percentage. I'll come up with a more clever title here, but let's look at this 1-5 Minnesota team. We're not quite to the elimination chamber yet. We'll see if the Vikings are our team that we throw in there this week. But I want to find out, this is a team that's 1-5. The coaching, going into the season, I thought if you had an experienced coach, an experienced quarterback, an experienced team, that you should have real success, because with no preseason, no OTAs, it was the veteran teams that I thought that had consistency at those positions that were going to be successful. So I thought the Vikings on the short list were going to be pretty darn good. At least 9-7, 10-6. You got to think they'd have an advantage over some teams, and yet they look like one of the 3 worst teams or 4 or 5 worst teams in the NFL. So let's talk about who we blame this on. We're 1-5, and let's attach a percentage to this. Let's start with Zach, because I think he has a very simple percentage system on this one.
Yeah, so, I kind of went down the line, and I'm going to start with the offensive line. I think the offensive line takes part of the blame, and so I gave them 5%. Right, they've been inconsistent. They're not the O-line that they haven't had a great O-line, but they're not even as good as they used to be.
That's true.
And that wasn't that good. I gave 20% of the blame to Kirk. He has some good numbers, but he has some games where he just blows up, and he takes you out of the game. I think some of his numbers are empty because they get down and then he throws the ball 80 times. And Zim didn't want him, right? Like, we got to go back and think about that. Like, Zim didn't want him. And if you look at it, right, like, Zimmer was 39-25 over 4 years with Castle, Teddy, Bradford, and Keenum. He won 2 division titles. He went to the NFC title game. Now with Cousins, he's 19, 18, and 1. And I know there's other parts that go into that. But so I give a good chunk of the blame to Kirk, 20%.
Okay.
So then Zim gets 10% of the blame. He seems curmudgeon-y. He seems unwilling to change. And it's almost like I get the vibe in some of his post-game interviews, like he's ready to be done.
You do get that vibe.
Yeah. Blame the offense. And it's almost like he's saying, hey, like, you guys didn't give me what I wanted. Like, I wanted to play defense and get a caretaker in here, and we spent all this money in draft picks on offense, and look what it gets you. But the common thing for all those...
We got sad music in the background here as we do this. This is very fascinating.
Sorry, Lauren's watching a movie.
You put the microphone, I think, right by the TV. I swear sometimes it's fantastic. But I actually
when
think
you live in a one-bedroom apartment.
No, I think it's great mood music. I think it's really good for when Zach was painting this. I almost kind of like it. It kind of sets the scene for the depression thing we're talking about. All right, so keep going, Zach.
Okay, so then I've got, if you look at the things, the O-line, Kirk Cousins, Zimmer, what do they all have in common? They all fall on Trader Rick. So Spielman gets 60% of the blame. He's the one who didn't go with Zim's direction. He went with Kirk. He hasn't addressed the O-line for a long time. He does have some good draft picks, but he's also blown a lot. So I have 60% of the blame to Trader Rick.
Wow. I didn't see you going that direction. That's a very interesting list. I'm fascinated by this.
And so what you may have noticed there, that's only 95% though.
Okay. Well, what's the other 5?
The last 5% falls to Zim's girlfriend, Katrina Michton. I don't know if you've seen the photos of her and stuff, but it's clear that he is not 100% focused on football right now, and it's hard to blame him for that, so she takes the last 5%.
It's the Danica Patrick thing all over again. But it's Mike Zimmer's Danica Patrick. It's ruining the team. I have not seen a picture of her. Is she good? What's her name? Katrina Michton? I knew he was dating like a Maxim model.
He is definitely out kicking the coverage for being an
dear
old
Lord. Dear Lord. Are you kidding me? She knows that Mike Zimmer can't see, right? Like, she knows. Mike Zimmer can't see out of his eyes. What is happening here?
Well, he's doing something right.
Mike Zimmer's 1,000 years old. Oh, dear God.
He's doing something right. It's about the only thing he's doing right, but he's doing something right.
You definitely want to talk about out kicking the cover. Not punching your weight. He is punching way above his weight. Are you kidding me?
I feel like Kanye wrote a song about her.
I was just about to make the same statement.
Stop that. You can't say that. Oh, that's terrible. Anyway, that's probably true. But, good Lord. Okay. Wow. Zim? I guess you are a closer. I didn't think you were, but look at that. Anyway, Ryan, the blame game. The percentages blame game. Where are you at?
Okay, look, let's bring it in here. Let's talk a little bit about the Vikings, because I have wasted a lot of hours and a lot of time and a lot of paper writing down my thoughts about this Vikings team.
He'll be a Bears fan by the end of this podcast.
I have spent years of emotion. I have poured my heart and soul into my fandom of this team. I have broken my wallet more than once to see them play a football game. I'm telling you right now.
Is your wallet made of glass?
No, it's made of leather. That's how hard these games hit my wallet sometimes, Tim. I've not been wealthy. I'm sad to say this. But it's hard to be a fan this year.
Yes.
It feels like we get a few of these years every decade, don't we?
There's
my entire life, Green Bay's been good at football, but we've been to 4 NFC Championship games in my lifetime, and we haven't won a damn one of them.
Let's not get carried away. Green Bay's been good at football. They had Ray Rhodes for a year.
No. My lifetime.
Ray Rhodes year, they were 8-8.
That's true. Their worst year was 8-8. I guess you're right.
I was born in 1993, Tim. I've not seen many bad Packers teams.
Yeah, you missed the Lindy and Fonte years.
So I just want to be really clear. I'm feeling a little bit and it's starting to wear on me. You get to this point, every Vikings fan gets to this point in their life when they've been watching the team for almost 30 years, and they just get apathetic. They just get tired. If they win, I'll be happy. But if they lose, I'm not going to lose my mind. It's not going to ruin my day. I'm just done. And I've got a few people to blame for that. So let's talk about that for just a second.
I've been where you are, my friend. Actually, I am where you are. But I was there 4 years ago. So
we're going to assign percentages in just a minute, but I want to talk about the offensive line. I don't blame the offensive line for being bad football players. Some guys just aren't very good at football. Doesn't mean they should be in the NFL. I blame the general manager and the head coach for putting together that roster and that team and that lineup because they're dog shit. I'm sorry to swear on the pod, but man, that offensive line is boo-boo. That offensive line is awful. They couldn't stop a pile of kittens rolling down the field if they had a bulldozer. And I'll tell you what, I'm getting kind of tired of watching them play. It makes me sad. It ruins my life to watch these guys play football.
Cue up that sad music again. We really need that beyond you.
Number 2, when I watch Kirk Cousins play football, I'm glad I don't have kids because I don't want them to grow up watching that. I want them to know what good football is, which is why we're going to be watching Packers games on repeat until they understand what good football is. And if the Vikings want to change Vikings fans saying stuff like that, they should be a better football team.
Just don't show them last Sunday's film.
All I'm saying is they got a couple rings in my lifetime, Tim, and I haven't seen a single damn one.
It's a great point. Can't argue with any of that. The facts are the facts.
We're gonna watch Ohio State football until my eyes bleed because I'm so sick of watching the Vikings. Now look, Kirk Cousins missed on the first play from scrimmage a touchdown throw. If he throws that ball to the back, Judge, it's a completely different ball game. But you know what he didn't do? The right thing. It's a pattern with him. It's about the only damn consistent thing on this team is the fact that you can count on Kirk Cousins to make the critical mistake in the critical spot. So he's the percentage for Kirk Cousins for me is like 25%. The guy can't
25%.
The guy can't play football. He can throw the ball. He's made some good throws, but he's garbage time. We should call him Oscar the Grouch. The guy lives in the garbage can half the game. He comes out, sings his song, goes back in, and we don't know what the hell he was for. Why is he here? He's a waste of money, a waste of space, a waste of a roster spot that we could be using to shore up the defense and play some damn football. But for the love of God, we spent $28.5 million on a quarterback, extended him for God knows what reason. And here we are talking about a 1-5 team with a quarterback who threw 3 picks in the first half against the worst pass defense in the NFL. Man, I'm tired of it. Dalvin Cook can't stay healthy, but we're going to extend him for another 4 years.
I did speak against that. I thought that was a terrible idea.
What the hell, man? Did we just fall asleep and forget what brought us to the NFC title game? Defense and an offense that didn't turn the damn ball over. We scored some points, but we controlled the ball. We had a couple of good offensive games, but it wasn't what won us the division that year.
So you're going 20% on Kirk.
I've been 25% Kirk, but here's I'm getting back to the defense for a reason here, and I know I'm waxing on this a little bit.
You are waxing depression on this. Zach and I are ready to come over to your house and take the belt and shoelaces away. You and Ryan Fitzpatrick need to get a room.
We do. I'd like him to be in the quarterback's room at TCO practice center and have Kirk Cousins gone because I'd rather have Ryan Fitzpatrick at this point. We can't afford him because we went with something called Sean Mannion as a backup. Now look, the defense is what won us all those games. The defense is what did good things for us, and Zimmer knows defense. And I've been a fire Zimmer guy for a couple of weeks. And you know what? Part of me still is. But it's hard to blame a guy for doing the best he can with a roster that's been put together with duct tape and dental floss. And you're missing all of your key pieces on defense. You have no depth anywhere. You have no money to sign depth anywhere. And you're running out of draft picks because you're trading for guys like Yannick Ngakoue, who's a good player, but he's a ton of money in a system where you don't have a lot of money. So 25% goes to Kirk. 5% goes to Mike Zimmer, and everything else goes to Rick Spielman. Everything else goes to Rick Spielman because Rick Spielman has completely screwed this roster.
Oh my God!
Rick Spielman has overseen the complete decline of this team since 2017 without pumping the brakes.
Oh
Rick
my
Spielman
heavens!
Has put us in a cap hell. Rick Spielman continues to draft players that aren't offensive linemen.
Oh my God! I'm coming, Elizabeth. Oh my God! Are you kidding me? Wow, Ryan.
How about trading draft picks for kickers that you cut a week later?
That's a great point. I don't disagree with the cutting of the kicker. That was a bad one.
Mike Zimmer's not signing these guys to contracts that are way too long for guys that don't deserve it.
In fairness, Mike Zimmer is lobbying to get, like Anthony Barr, he was leaving. Mike Zimmer didn't want Anthony Barr to go, so he overpaid for Anthony Barr. Like, I mean, that's pretty clear that some of these signings are Zimmer going to Spielman going, I want that guy.
But you're not paying for Anthony Barr what you're paying for Kirk Cousins.
Right, and Zim wanted nothing to do with Cousins.
I think that's probably true. Now, here's what I'll say. So I'll come back to this a little bit because both of you are on Spielman a little bit. Zimmer's got to eat this. He's going to get 50% from me. Here's why. Rick Spielman, you can rip on him now, but here's the thing. Rick Spielman gave him a 4-year window to win. He said, I'm going to give you the defense. We are going to pay for this at some point. But when you think about when they got to the NFC Championship game, they had the Minneapolis Miracle. First of all, grossly outcoached in the second half of the Saints game. He was lucky to win it. And then gets completely embarrassed in an NFC title game in Philadelphia. And I do mean completely embarrassed. Doug Peterson's not exactly Vince Lombardi. And he ran circles around Zimmer's defense. You did have, going into that game, for the record, a pretty good running back, 2 really good wide receivers, a really good tight end, an okay offensive line, a good enough to win offensive line, and the defense that was supposed to be vaunted. You had all these guys on the D-line. You paid for Linval Joseph. I'd say that was a pretty good signing. Everson Griffin, I'd say that worked out pretty well for them too. You had linebackers that could play, and you had a secondary that you invested in, that you put your money in, Terrence Newman and the like, Harrison Smith. You've had players. You had your chance. The window was there. He blew it. Also, most defensive coaches, most really good defensive coaches, they hire an offensive coordinator and they get the hell out of the way. Pete Carroll has had 2. In a decade, he's had 2. Darrell Bevell, Brian Schottenheimer, and they basically do the same thing. On top of that, Bill Belichick's had 3 in 20 years. 3. You go down the line, the best coaches tend to stick with what they got. But Zim, he is now traded. He's had 5 coordinators in 6 years. And yeah, they're yeah, go ahead.
As I say, some of those guys have been hired for head coaching jobs.
Fair. Yes, that's true. However, a lot of them weren't. Norv Turner basically fires in the middle of the second season because he wanted Shermer to be the guy. So Shermer's the guy. He has the great season. He leaves. But instead of going and getting a Shermer type, he hires John DeFilippo, who's supposed to be the up-tempo offensive guy. And John DeFilippo, in fairness to him, came in and wanted to be the up-tempo offensive guy. He wanted to throw the ball because that's what he does. He comes from the system that does that. And Zimmer all of a sudden was like, that's not what I want to do. I don't want to pass the ball. Then why the hell did you hire this guy? Because that's what he does. He passes the ball more than he runs. That's what he does. But he didn't give the offensive coordinator a chance to do anything. Instead, he neuters him and fires him after 13 games to give Stefanski an opportunity, and I thought he was okay. Did a nice enough job. Got himself a head coaching job, and now he's here with Gary Kubiak. And so that's 5 in 6 years. And you got nothing to show for it. I find the lack of consistency the problem, and that's on the head coach. The head coach needs to cultivate a system that people can just be a cog in the wheel in. The one thing that's never going to change in Kansas City, Andy Reid's offense is Andy Reid's offense. It doesn't matter who else is there. Like the identity of the team is firmly established. They are not changing. When Brian Schottenheimer leaves Seattle, they are going to go plug in another guy who is just like Brian Schottenheimer, and they will run the exact same offense. So Zimmer deserves some heat there. Plus, Zimmer continues to be he just fails to come up big in big games. It's not Rick Spielman's fault that we can't stop anybody late in a football game. That's Zimmer's defense. First of all, the Seattle thing from 2 weeks ago was egregious. But there's too many games like that. There's way too many games where it's like we've got a lead, we lose a lead. We can't hold a lead. We gave up, 21 points in 7 minutes in Seattle?
Yep.
I mean, Rick Spielman ain't calling the plays. So the coach has to get some heat. He had a window. He had talent. He didn't get the job done. And he talks a big game for a guy who hadn't won anything. So he gets 50%. Half the blame goes to the head coach. That's how this works. You're the head coach. You don't like it, don't take the job. 10% goes to Kirk Cousins. He just hasn't been, he hasn't been worth the money. He hasn't been as good as advertised. He is what we thought he was. He's a hell of a businessman because he's going to walk away with $200 million in this NFL career, and he's going to have, it's basically going to be like $20 million a win. I don't know. It's going to be a really impressive business move by Cousins. In the end, he just hasn't been good enough. He's spotty. At times, he gives you just enough to keep you interested. But when you start to look at what big-time quarterbacks do, like when I watch Tom, when I watch Aaron Rodgers, Drew Brees, the like, and you start to look at young guys like Justin Herbert, you start to go like, man, this guy just doesn't have that. He doesn't have the it that you wished he had. So 10% to Cousins. 10% to the offensive line. There are guys that were good that have disappeared. Like Pat Elflein, his first year or two was half decent. And you thought you had something there, and he stinks. Like he is really bad. And we continue to just throw guys in there. We'll spend, Garrett Bradbury, first round pick. So you can't say we don't spend on the line, but I haven't seen enough out of him to think he's any good. Offensive line just has not been good. It has not gelled. It has not gotten better. They've brought in every big-time offensive line coach under the sun in here to get it done, and they've failed. Whether it was Jeff Davidson, the late Tony Sperano, whoever they have now, they just haven't gotten the job done. 10% goes to the offensive coordinator carousel. When you don't have consistency, you don't win games. It's really that simple. Ryan talks about coaching being consistent. When you're changing the offense every year, it's hard to be consistent. Really hard to win. And that's where Cousins can't take all the blame. He's changing systems every year. And it's very hard to do a good job under that circumstance. Now, here's where I'll give you 20% on Rick Spielman. Here's where I will absolutely agree with you. And Zach, I think you and I have talked about this. I feel like the quarterback position is like the currency of the league, right? It's the money of this league. It is malpractice to not draft a quarterback every year or every other year. You don't have to do it in the first round, but you should always be drafting a quarterback. Zach, I think you and I talked about that, right?
Yeah, I think we talked about it a little bit on our missing week 1 pod.
Oh, yeah, I think you're probably right. So I think that you're right. I think we did talk about that there. And the fact is this. Since 2011, we have drafted 3 quarterbacks. We drafted Christian Ponder, Teddy Bridgewater, and this past year in the 7th round, we took Nate Stanley. We have not taken a quarterback, 3 quarterbacks, that's it, 3, in 9 years. And now you're in this pickle where you got to spend $28 million for an average guy in free agency. And, it is what it is. If you were drafting guys, though, and having that money on your bench and looking at it and developing them, you would have either trading chips or you would have a guy that comes out of the woodwork. I look at Pete Carroll, and you think of how different it would have been if they just would have said, we got Matt Flynn, we got T-Jack, we don't need to draft a guy. And then you leave Russell Wilson for somebody else to go take. You always draft because you just never know. And Brad Childress actually was better at this than I think. Well, Spielman I think was maybe there, but Childress in 3 years they took Tyler Thigpen, Joe Webb, Tavares Jackson, John David Booty. Like there was a gap where they were taking guys every single year. Now I'm not saying any of those guys worked out, but the fact is you were at least giving yourself looks. You were giving yourself bites at the apple. We're not doing that enough. That's on the court. That's on the GM. You got to be drafting QBs more consistently.
I mean, they did draft Teddy, and you can't.
Yep, I don't blame him for Teddy. That's unfortunate.
But they also decided to move on from Teddy. They could have brought him back. I think that's what Zim wanted. I think Zim wanted Teddy.
I wanted Teddy.
I wanted Teddy. I was happy with Teddy. I don't know why they felt compelled to like not at least see. I mean, you invested so much in him. I mean, why couldn't you have given him a 2-year deal and seen if he could be healthy enough to play? It still baffles me that we didn't ride that all the way out. Or at least see it through.
Will Teddy and Rule be issuing an apology this week to me? After you called for my apology the last few weeks.
In fact, I think we did get an email to timpodcast1@yahoo.com from Matt Rule specifically saying, we were wrong, Zach was right, we're back, we deserve our spot on the list in the Elimination Chamber. So thank you very much. Sincerely, Matt Rule. And by the way, go to hell, Art Briles. I don't know why he threw that jab in there at the end. I don't know if it's a Baylor thing, but it really feels out of sorts. I felt it was unprofessional. So there's our blame game for the Vikings. You guys want to put it all on Spielman, or at least mostly on Spielman. I want to put it some on Spielman, but mostly on Mike Zimmer. And both might be gone at the end of the year. We all might get our wish at the end of the season. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, I think they're all done at the end of the year.
Yeah, you almost got to go and clean the whole house out now, don't you feel like? Especially if this thing really gets off the rails and you go like 3-13.
The problem is that they're stuck with the quarterback.
Yeah, I don't think you can't unload him for a year. You got to wait at least through next year.
Yeah, you have to. I mean, you can, but if you cut him, it's like $28 million against the cap.
Yeah, you can't have that. You can't have that dead. You can't have that on the unless you're ready to literally deflate again and go 3-13 2 years in a row.
I think there's a way around that.
Well, what's that?
I think there's a way to navigate this. Personally, I think that you should keep Cousins. You got to keep him financially. It's nice to have him, even if you draft a quarterback and he has to sit there and learn for a year while Cousins plays out, this one last big year of his contract. It makes sense. I think you get rid of Zimmer, you get rid of Spielman, you keep Cousins, you draft a quarterback early, and you draft a guy who you know is going to need a little bit of time to learn, but has a lot of talent. A guy you can justify keeping on the bench for a year so the fans don't get ravenous. I think that's step one. Step two is you've got to trade some guys to acquire some draft picks here where you can stock up on basically on offensive line and defense depth. You don't have any depth. You've got nothing on your offensive line. We are almost out of offensive linemen, and it's just unacceptable in today's NFL. You don't have the offensive line talent around the league to say that you shouldn't have that much depth because a guy doesn't play well. Well, there's always a guy who might be just as good or better right behind him because none of them are really all that good right now.
The worst O-line situation, the Vikings or the Raiders who sent home all 5 starting?
Yeah, I saw that because they were around Trent Brown, right? Because Trent Brown tested positive.
Yeah.
Well,
it's a bad day, man.
Isn't the word, though, that he was on the strip with no mask and he's buying, he's at some store without, and he's just kind of cavalier about it. And that's kind of, I have a hard time feeling bad for these Raiders. I swear, they're like I said, they've been the most cavalier team on the masks and the protocols this entire time.
I hadn't seen that, but I'm
not sure. I think I read that somewhere, but I need to get. I don't have clarification on that. I'm using rumor here on the pod. That's kind of how I go. But I'll try to confirm that. But I thought I read that today. That maybe that they had seen that he had maybe been out and about and contact tracing might be a challenge and all of that sort of thing. But we'll see. And that is part of it. You live in Vegas and you're playing in Vegas. It's sort of hard to just stay at home, right? I feel like that's like the one city you don't stay at home in. I don't know. I feel like it's hard to just chill out.
My senior year of college, we went out to Vegas on spring break, and I had a job interview or job offer while I was out there. And I would probably be dead right now had I taken it.
What? Were you you weren't driving like Tupac Shakur's limo, were you? I mean, that wouldn't have been a good job to take. I wouldn't have taken that one.
I'm just saying the lifestyle out there would not
That's
would
not
have
for you.
coincided well with me.
No, I think you're only allowed to be there 48 hours, and then you need to be back on a plane. I think that's kind of a rule that they've set for you. Ryan, you haven't been to Vegas, have you?
No.
Yeah, see,
Never.
Ryan, you strike me as a guy who's 48 hours max in Las Vegas. Like that's all you get. You got to come right home, take the red eye right back, and that's all you get. You get 48 hours. Enjoy it.
Yeah, it would be a lot of illicit things going on.
Yeah, a lot of debauchery. Just a lot of really questionable decisions being
things
made.
that if I said them out loud, any political aspirations that I hold would be
Out the
gone
window.
instantly.
Yeah, you need to be very careful about what you say here and what you endorse. Just get back to your Twitch game with AOC. I know that you and her had a good time the other night, and I'm happy for you.
Me and all the other 434,999.
But you really felt like she was talking to you, right? Like you really felt like you had a kinship with her.
He watched it again.
Let's get to the power rankings. We are at that time in the podcast where we figure it out. We have a new number one this week, I would think, after last week's performance from Green Bay. By the way, Tampa Bay, maybe they figured it out down in Tampa. Let's go Bucs. No, I'm just kidding. Anyway, last week, Ryan, we did this where we kind of did a little snake version of this, and I like that, so I think we're going to do it. I think I'll start with my one. Zach will give his one. You'll give your 1 and 2, and we'll snake it back. I think that's kind of how we'll do it. All right, so my number one team, I think it has to just be the Seattle Seahawks by default. They didn't play last week, but Green Bay loses. They move up a spot. I think right now they are the number one team in the NFL, the Seattle Seahawks. Zach?
I have Pittsburgh in my number one slot. I feel like they're more balanced. They're maybe not as good as Seattle offensively, but they're significantly better defensively. And so they're in my one spot.
I think my number one is the Tennessee Titans.
Wow.
Like I said, I really appreciate a good disciplined football that can control the ball and play good defense. Had a little bit of a scare against Houston, but a team that fires its head coach can do that to you. They can look a little different and things go a little awry. I think my number two would be Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh number 2, Zach?
I'm with Seattle at number 2. Although it will be interesting, I don't know if you saw the news today, but apparently they're sniffing around.
Yeah.
Antonio Brown.
So they want to blow up their locker room in a year. I see how this works.
Yeah, I always think whenever you can get a really great receiver like DK Metcalf around like a malcontent like Antonio Brown, got to do it. Anytime you can, got to do it. Got to pull the trigger on that.
Anytime you can get a nice quiet guy like DK Metcalf around an absolute fucking diva that's going to completely poison his mind and how this league should operate, well, you got to do it. You got to pull the trigger.
All of the circus around him aside, he just doesn't do a lot for me right now. He's been out of the league now for a while.
Yep.
Getting older. The shelf life on wide receivers isn't that long. I don't know. I guess it doesn't. I mean, if you're adding him as your third or fourth wide receiver, great. But I don't think like he instantly are like, oh man, he's going to catch 15 touchdowns the rest of the way.
Yeah, and I've always said this, like especially about like running backs or anybody. It's really hard to take a year off and be good. Like it's really hard to do that. And I think we're seeing that even with the guys like Gronkowski. Like he finally caught a touchdown last week, but he doesn't look anything. It's not like he got better. Everybody's like, "Oh, he healed up after a year." It's like, yeah, but that's great, no, but it doesn't help you become a better football player. Like you got to be in it. You got to be doing it. I like Pittsburgh at number 2. I think they are a really good team. I like Mike Tomlin. They're a well-coached team as long as Roethlisberger's healthy, and they've got weapons all of a sudden. Like it pisses me off watching Pittsburgh just continue to find guys that make plays, and it's pretty good. They're going to be a tough out, and I think they beat Tennessee this weekend, but that's kind of an interesting game to watch. I'm really excited to see that one. But Pittsburgh's number 2. My number 3 is Kansas City. They hold that spot. I still think they are the team to beat long-term in the AFC, but right now they have to continue to rebuild that momentum. They had a good week last week. They won a tough game in Buffalo on Monday night in the rain on the road with no vibe, no energy. They did everything that they needed to do. They've got a couple of nice wins now over Baltimore and Buffalo. Both road games. I kind of like Kansas City. They're my 3.
I have Tennessee at 3 for a lot of the reasons that Ryan mentioned, and I'll tell you right now, the winner of the Tennessee-Pittsburgh game gets my 1 slot next week.
Wow. Ryan.
Yeah, I would agree with that. My number 3 is going to be Seattle for all the reasons mentioned before. They're a really good team. I was thinking about putting them at 4, to be honest, because I don't really buy their defense. But I think that they can keep up with any team. There's no shootout game that's out of reach for them, and I think that that's an asset to have in a league where defenses don't seem to be playing as well this year in the NFC. So I think that they're probably my number 3. My number 4, I would probably say Kansas City. I think that they're playing well. I think that they haven't quite hit their stride yet. I don't think they haven't looked like they're really clicking on all cylinders yet. Not really sure why that is, but I mean they're still dangerous and they're still a top 5 team. But I don't think that they're ahead of any of the undefeated teams right now.
I have the Packers at 4. It didn't look good last week.
Yeah, it was bad.
It looked like it was going to be a boat race the other direction.
Yeah, they jumped out early.
Green Bay was up 10-0 with the ball, and that game turned on those 2 interceptions. The first one on a bad decision by Rodgers, the second one on a ball that deflects into hands and almost gets returned for a touchdown. And from there, they cranked up the pressure and looked like they were getting home. Bakhtiari's injury is big. We'll see how long he's out for, because that changes things for the Packers. But I think Green Bay is going to have the luxury of, their division isn't great. Even though they're technically behind the Bears, I don't think anyone buys the Bears right now.
No, not at all.
So I think they're going to be there in the end.
Yeah. And then this brings me back, right? I'm not the 4. Okay, so it's my spot. All right. Number 4 for me is Tennessee. I like them. I think they're really good. I need to see them beat I need to see them beat Pittsburgh. Like, that's what I need them to do. Like, they really struggled against a bad Houston Texans team. And if it wasn't for Romeo Crennel going for 2, which, by the way, we got to slow it. We got to pump the brakes on the going for 2 every 6 minutes. I mean, we got to stop this chasing of the points by the coaches. I don't give a damn what the data tells you and what the sabermetrics tell you and what all of this stuff tells you. It doesn't matter to me. I don't care what the crib sheet says. Stop chasing the points. You're going to regret it more often than not, I feel. And I thought it was just a really I don't hate it. I mean, Crennel, I think, could make some case, but man, I'm just seeing way too much of it. Just seeing way too much of it right now. I need to see Tennessee beat Pittsburgh. If they do, I think I'm with Zach. I think they're worthy of all the praise in the world. I do think they're a well-coached team, and Tannehill looks like a legitimate threat right now. He looks really good. My 5th team, as of now, is Green Bay. They do fall all the way they stay in the top 5. I agree with you. I'm a little concerned about the Bakhtiari thing. I was very concerned at just Rodgers has Rodgers is great. I'm not ripping Rodgers, but he does get like a case of the fuckets. Like when they're down by like 20, like he has like the worst he has bad body language when they start trailing in games. And he gets sacked a few times. I think it upsets him. I think it makes him. I don't like like you saw that in San Francisco last year in the playoffs where like they got beat and they looked like they couldn't get anything done. And you just sort of there's like a little bit of a checkout factor on Rodgers in those kinds of games, I think. And it just felt that way on Sunday. It just didn't feel like he was super interested come fourth quarter of that game. And so Green Bay's 5. I still think they're really good, but clearly if you hit them in the mouth early, you can rattle them. And that's a concerning thing going forward if you're Green Bay.
All right. Well, 2 things on what you've said there. One, the nice thing so far about the Matt LaFleur era is there's no gut-wrenching losses at the end.
That's fair. That's very true.
When they get beat, they get thumped, and you can check out pretty early.
That is true.
The going for 2 stuff. I think the problem with the chart is that the chart doesn't really account for further scoring. The chart is best used in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
when you're thinking there's maybe one or two more possessions left. But when you chase points, in the first half, and we saw with the Vikings, right, the point comes back to bite you later when you're like, man, I wish I had that extra point from, 50 minutes ago. So the chart, throw it out until the fourth quarter. My fifth team is the Chiefs. Offensively, they look good. They did it running the ball this week, which was new for them. It'll be interesting to see how they make use of Le'Veon Bell and if he has anything left in the tank or not. But I think the playoffs in the AFC are shaping up to be a lot of fun.
I agree. There looks like there's some really strong teams at the top there, and there are some teams that are 4-2 that I don't know if you want to play them in a one-game situation. There's some really interesting teams out there. Ryan, you're fifth.
Yeah, I would say that my fifth team would be the Chicago Bears.
Wow.
And I know that that's going to draw a reaction, but they're 5-1. They beat the Bucs and they beat the Panthers in consecutive weeks.
That's true.
Those are two good teams.
Yep.
Now,
the Panthers aren't good. We already eliminated them.
and I think that we're gonna see them if they're like really for real in the next 2 weeks. They've got two tough games against Tennessee and New Orleans. Those are a couple of tough games. So obviously, I might be wrong about this, but I mean, if they beat Tennessee and they can New Orleans, because I don't know if they have the firepower to keep up with New Orleans if New Orleans can get ahead. But and we won't know what the injury situation looks like after the Tennessee game. But if they can beat both those teams, they might be moving up my rankings.
Oh, if they beat both those teams, they'll be in the top three because that's two pretty legit wins. They'd be 7-1.
And that team's got a little moxie to them too. You don't hear much out of Khalil Mack, but
that's right. You don't.
That offense is quietly humming a bit. They're moving the ball.
Quietly humming is the correct word on Foles. I'm not sold on Nick Foles yet at all. I am not sold on any of this for the Bears. I mean, they did beat Carolina. I'm with you. And to go on the road and win a game, I think, against a team that had won 3 in a row, they deserve credit for that. And they beat up Tampa Bay. Like, they beat on Tom, and they deserve some credit. Defensively, I do think they are legitimately really, really good. I can't buy it.
I think they get a little bit of a bad rap for getting down early to the Falcons. But I mean, we've seen that the Falcons can score points.
You guys, they're 5-1, and their point differential is 12 points. Smoke and mirrors.
Hey man, any given Sunday,
they could be 5-5. They could be 5-6. Rams, Saints, Titans, Vikings, Packers. They could lose all those games.
You think they could lose to the Vikings? I mean, come on, a little respect here to Matt Nagy.
The Vikings are better than 1-5. They're a better team than that.
Maybe. Hope you're right.
You know what? I think that'll be. I can't wait to watch.
Too. I'd love them to pick around 10 or 11 again this year.
Oh, I love it. All right, let's move to the Elimination Chamber. We have got 5 teams in there. We eliminate one team every week here on the podcast. We've eliminated the Jets, and we can't go back, so no backsies. So the Jets are out. They were our Week 1 elimination. The Panthers were our Week 2 elimination. The Broncos were Week 3. The Texans were Week 4 after the firing of Bill O'Brien, and the Falcons were last week after the firing of Dan Quinn. Many, many, many good nominations potentially this week, but let's find out who's joining those teams in the Elimination Chamber. Ryan, who do you want to put up? Let's at least get the discussion rolling before we agree on somebody.
I would like to nominate the Minnesota Vikings for the, what is this, the third, fourth week in a row that I've been on, that I've nominated the Vikings as the elimination team. I just don't think they're very good. There's no chance they're going to make the playoffs. There's no chance they're going to do anything. This team's dead in the water. They've got 3 teams in the division ahead of them who are better than them, healthier than them, and more talented than them. And you can't overcome it. There's nothing to overcome there. Team's dead.
Well, I know you were out last week, Ryan. Tim and I discussed that the loser, the Jags and the Lions, might be the de facto eliminator this week. And I'm going to stick with that. The Jags lost. They are, I believe,
1-5
5
too.
losses in a row now.
Yep. Gardner Minshew looks really bad now.
Yeah. Garbage time Garner is great to have on your fantasy team. I started him this week over Drew Brees in one of my leagues because they get down and then he throws the ball around and I think he had 2 fantasy points with 5 minutes to go in the third quarter, and then he runs one in, and then he throws one in with 4 minutes to go in the game, and then gets the 2-point conversion, and all of a sudden he's having a huge day. So he is great to have in fantasy purposes.
Would you take Gardner Minshew over Kirk Cousins if you had to win a game?
Probably not. I like Gardner Minshew.
I think he's got a career in this league as a fringe starter, a Fitzpatrick type. I think we might look at Minshew at the end of his career as a guy who plays for 8 teams.
Quarterback is so, I think, dependent on the situation, the coach you end up with, and I think we agree that things are not good in Jacksonville.
Yeah. I
was optimistic at the start of the year when they kind of dumped everyone. They played really well week 1. They've got some good wide receivers, but I don't know. I think they're a mess. I'm ready to write them off and stay the execution of the Vikings at least through the bye week. All right.
So that puts it to me, I guess. All right. I think there are many good nominations, obviously. I think Jacksonville, for the reasons you mentioned, I definitely think the Jaguars have less talent than the Vikings do. They have less guys. Although I like Laviska Shenault. I think he's a talent. I think Chark's a good player. I think they've got guys. Keelan Cole, they've got some guys, but I don't think they have enough guys. And I'm not super sold on Marrone. I don't know if he's a very good coach. I'm still waiting to throw out the Washington professional football team. They have no quarterback. They're 1-5. They've lost 5 in a row, but that division is so bad that they're 1 game away from being in the first place in the division. So it's just hard to eliminate any one of those teams. It's hard to say. I do agree with Ryan, though. The Vikings are 3.5 games behind the second place team. That is a tough spot to be in a division that's, kind of, I'm not going to say that's loaded, but the Bears look like they're going to win 10, 11 games, and the Packers look like they're going to win 10, 11 games. You're asking the Vikings at this point just to go 8-2 to get in the mix. Same with Jacksonville. You can make a case for any one of those teams. Mainly because I like ripping the Vikings and I don't want to dismiss them this soon because it's fun to. If we dismiss them, we don't really get to talk about them. I think I want to eliminate the Jags based on what you and Zach talked about last week. It was a loser leaves town match. I think we got to make it a loser leaves town match. But Ryan, I think the Vikings are right there. I think the Vikings, if they lose next week, I know Ryan, we might put up, but I will decree this. Are the Vikes on bye this week? Who do they play?
They are. Could the Vikings be the first team eliminated during their bye?
Yeah. You know what? That's possible. The Vikings, that would be delicious if we eliminated them on a bye week. Oh, heavens. Oh, how good would that be? Ryan?
I'm going to put it out there right now that if we get to week 16 and the Vikings have locked up a top 3 pick, I'm buying a Vikings Trevor Lawrence jersey and I'm wearing it on this pod while we're recording.
It's too bad he will be a Jet. He'll be a Jet, though. That's the only problem you're going to run into.
No, I believe.
Will the Vikings have the bye week, then they have the Packers.
Yeah,
1-6, baby.
I know we've talked about how bad the East is and that anyone could win it.
Yep.
But I almost feel like the Thursday night game is our loser leaves town match. Eagles and Giants.
It could be, right? Because I don't think Carson Wentz is. I think Carson Wentz is the only thing they've got in Philadelphia, and he is single-handedly keeping them in games late. He deserves. He's getting too much heat, and I'm just there's not enough guys around him. He isn't playing well. He's not playing great. But, there's nothing there in Philadelphia right now, and I don't think he's getting bailed out by much. But I think you could be right. That could be a loser leaves town, although that division, it really depends on what Dallas does. If Dallas continues to lose, and it stays
Dallas,
one
Dallas
game
and
apart.
Washington. They all play each other this week.
They all play each other this week, so maybe there'll be a little separation at the end.
Yep.
Oh, heavens. What if the Giants and Washington all win, and it's literally like a half game that separates the 4 teams all with losing records? Oh, my goodness. What a disaster.
Is that division? What's the worst record to win a division in NFL history?
Well, I feel like didn't the Seahawks get to the playoffs at 7-9 one year or something like that?
Yep.
So that was against the Rams. I remember they played on a Sunday night game. They both stunk. But then the Seahawks won a playoff game, right? That was the Marshawn Lynch beast mode game that season where they got to the playoffs and then they won a playoff game.
2010, I think.
Yeah, it was like, wasn't it Carroll's first year or something, that first or second year in Seattle, I want to say?
I think so. I think you're right.
Oh, good times. Man, we got a lot to look at. The Elimination Chamber is going to start to fill up. It's maybe Carolina right now is the Randy Orton of that Elimination Chamber. They seem to be the best of that Elimination Chamber to this point, but we will have to wait and see as we continue to watch this play out. But we'll put Jacksonville in the chamber this week. Congratulations, Jacksonville. You are in. But Minnesota, you are the guys banging on the outside of the cage trying to get in, and you might get your wish very, very soon. I know Ryan would like that. But I also like I like us to be able to keep talking about the Vikes, so we need them to stay here as long as possible, I think. All right. An hour and 11 minutes, guys. We did a great job this week. A lot of show. Holy smoke. I'm exhausted. If you need to hear us on the podcast, remember to find us all over the place. Apple Podcast, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Go ahead, subscribe, tell a friend. We appreciate it. You can also find us on our host site, timbodbean at timbodbean.podbean.com or timpodcast.podbean.com. Maybe I should learn my own URL. And then you can also drop us an email. You can find Ryan on Twitter, find Zach on Twitter, find myself. I'm sure we're out there somewhere. And all of that good stuff. We have our first listener that's outside of the United States in Germany. Hey, thank you, Germany. Love you. Love you. And David Hasselhoff and me, 2 biggest things in Germany right now. No question about that. That's awesome. So thank you for all of those folks who are listening. I do appreciate you. That is our podcast for the week. We'll be back again next week where we will break down Week 7 and prepare for our mid-season awards. So excited. A lot to give out. It's going to be great. Anything else we need to catch up on? I think we got it. All right, so that's the podcast. For Ryan, for Zach, I'm Tim, saying keep your head up, and we'll see you next time.